the first thing I'd do as president is sign the Freedom of Choice Act. That's the first thing that I'd do.
Last year, before the Planned Parenthood Action Fund, Barack Obama told abortion on-demand activists, "The first thing I'd do as president is sign the Freedom of Choice Act." With a single stroke of the pen, the so-called Freedom of Choice Act would essentially wipe away virtually every state law that limits abortion nationwide, allowing abortion on demand in all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason and without any restrictions. It would undo decades of legal work, research and educational successes. It would invalidate all of the major types of pro-life laws that have been upheld by the Supreme Court in the decades since Roe v. Wade. Among the types of laws that the Freedom of Choice Act would invalidate are the national ban on partial birth abortion that the Supreme Court upheld on April 18 in Gonzalez v. Carhart, the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits most federal funding of abortion, and the laws of many states that restrict state funding of abortion. Laws in effect in some jurisdictions that bar abortions in government-operated hospitals. Laws requiring parental notification or consent, or judicial authorization, before an abortion can be performed on a minor daughter. Laws requiring that girls and women seeking abortion receive certain information on matters such as fetal development and alternatives to abortion, and then wait a specified period before the abortion is actually performed, usually 24 or 48 hours. Conscience laws, allowing doctors, nurses, or other state-licensed professionals, and hospitals or other healthcare providers, to decline to provide or pay for abortions. In addition, the provision of the so-called Freedom of Choice Act that prohibits any government agency or official from taking any action that would discriminate against the exercise of the so-called rights that are created from the Freedom of Choice Act, with respect to any benefits, facilities, services, or information, would leave government officials open to lawsuits for anything that anybody thought discriminates against abortion. This sweeping mandate could cover everything from rural health clinics, to health education programs in public schools, and even to pro-life speeches by public officials. From the perspective of the Catholic Church, abortion is like no other social issue. The Catholic Church allows for the possibility of a just war, that is, in the name of self-defense, and even capital punishment under rare circumstances, that is, when it is the only possible way of effectively defending human lives against the unjust aggressor, but there is no such thing as a just abortion. Anyone who has doubts about the Church's official position need only read Pope John Paul II's 1999 revisiting of Pope Paul VI's historic encyclical, Humanae Vitae. Pope John Paul said, "Depriving an innocent human being of life, and life undeniably begins at conception, is always morally evil." He adds, "This tradition is unchanged and unchangeable. There can be no yielding," he continues, "to convenient compromises or the temptation of self-deception. We are dealing," says the Pope bluntly, "with murder." Formal cooperation in an abortion constitutes a grave offense. The Church attaches the canonical penalty of excommunication to this crime against human life. A person who procures a completed abortion incurs excommunication latae sententiae, by the very commission of the offense, and subject to the conditions provided by canon law. The Church does not thereby intend to restrict the scope of mercy. Rather, she makes clear the gravity of the crime committed, the irreparable harm done to the innocent who is put to death, as well as to the parents and the whole of society. The inalienable right to life of every innocent human individual is a constitutive element of a civil society and its legislation. The inalienable rights of the person must be recognized and respected by civil society and the political authority. These human rights depend neither on single individuals nor on parents. Nor do they represent a concession made by society and the state. They belong to human nature and are inherent in the person by virtue of the creative act from which the person took his origin. Among such fundamental rights one should mention in this regard every human being's right to life and physical integrity from the moment of conception until death. The moment a positive law deprives a category of human beings of the protection which civil legislation ought to accord them, the state is denying the equality of all before the law. When the state does not place its power at the service of the rights of each citizen, and in particular of the more vulnerable, the very foundations of a state based on law are undermined. As a consequence of the respect and protection which must be ensured for the unborn child from the moment of conception, the law must provide appropriate penal sanctions for every deliberate violation of the child's rights. If a Roman Catholic votes for a pro-choice abortion-on-demand candidate like Barack Obama, then you have formally cooperated in enabling and empowering this politician to pass legislation that will help support and expand the abortion industry in the United States. Such formal cooperation is a grave offense, that is, a mortal sin, and is worthy of excommunication. Abortionists can only legally do what the law allows them to do, and voters in a democratic society ultimately determine what the laws will be by casting their votes. With regards to the argument for proportional reasons that some Catholics try to use to justify voting for Obama, there is nearly 1.5 million unborn human beings murdered each year in the United States and approximately 53 million American babies murdered since Roe v. Wade. There are no other political issues that even come close with regards to the number of human beings that are literally being murdered. There is no higher or more important issue than the unjust murder of human beings. Hence, Catholics cannot use the argument of proportional reasons to vote for Obama. With regards to the argument for matters of conscience that some Catholics try to use to justify voting for Obama, what if someone told you that they were going to rape your daughter since, according to their conscience, they saw nothing wrong with raping your daughter? Since this would-be rapist would be acting according to his conscience, would you then agree with him and let him proceed with the rape of your daughter? Of course you would not under any circumstances. Now, let's say someone told you that they were going to murder your baby daughter since, according to their conscience, they saw nothing wrong with murdering your baby daughter. Since this would-be murderer would be acting according to his conscience, would you then agree with him and let him proceed with the murder of your baby daughter? Again, of course you would not under any circumstances. So, you should be able to see from these two examples that anyone who says that the murder of the innocent unborn is not morally wrong according to their so-called conscience, is either deliberately lying or is very morally sick. With regards to our faith as Catholics, let us all remember that we are accountable for our actions to God. If we support pro-choice abortion-on-demand candidates, can we honestly expect that on our judgment day, that Jesus Christ will tell us, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant"? If we have done nothing to stop the slaughter of millions of innocent babies,